All right, let's dive into ancient Greece, but we're not talking togas and myths today.
Right.
We're going deeper.
Yeah.
We're uncovering a surprising link between their intense warfare, the birth of democracy, and this incredible cultural boom that still resonates today.
We tend to separate these concepts in our minds.
Totally.
War, politics, art, in ancient Greece, they were all completely intertwined.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to look at today.
Yeah.
And we're using Alexander Shapiro's Art Histories as our guide. He starts with this really powerful image, the painting Acropolis by Leo von Klenz.
Okay.
So picture this bustling ancient Athens bathed in sunlight with this majestic statue of Athena right at its heart. She holds a spear, but also, this is key, a massive hoplite shield.
And that shield, that's really the linchpin of our deep dive today. It belonged to a hoplite, a citizen soldier who completely reshaped Athenian society.
Okay, so imagine ancient Greece for a second. Not vast empires, but smaller city-states, constantly under threat from, larger, more powerful neighbors.
Yeah.
So how did they survive?
Right. How did they survive?
Enter the hoplite.
Exactly. The hoplites were the Athenian solution to a really common problem in warfare. How do you face a larger force?
Right.
And so what they did was they would create this dense formation of these warriors, a bronze and shield wall, advancing as one. This hoplite phalanx became like the cornerstone of Greek military strategy.
So it wasn't just about brute force, though, right?
No, not at all.
Shapiro really highlights how being a hoplite fostered this really intense sense of camaraderie and trust. I mean, you're going into battle shoulder to shoulder, relying on the person next to you for survival. That's got to create some serious bonds.
Oh, absolutely. That level of interdependence on the battlefield created a really unique social bond. You weren't just fighting for a king or, some distant ruler. You were fighting for the survival of your comrade, your neighbor, your friend.
It's a different kind of motivation.
Absolutely. And this is where we start to see the seeds of democracy being sown.
Okay, I see it. Because to be a hoplite, you couldn't just be anybody, right?
Right.
You needed the right gear.
You had to have
Heavy armor weapons.
Yeah.
This wasn't cheap stuff.
Yeah.
Athens needed citizens who could afford this,
Oh.
which led to the emergence of
A powerful middle class.
Mhm.
And, the Athenian government recognized this need for this class of citizen soldiers, and they actually enacted laws that empowered them. So, for example, one law actually mandated that citizens provide their own armor.
Okay.
Now, this unintentionally created an economic barrier to service, because if you couldn't afford the armor, you were essentially excluded.
Right.
So, to address this, Athens implemented reforms that gave more rights to this emerging middle class. They gained a voice, they could participate in politics, serve as jurors, all because of their hoplite status.
So this wasn't just some abstract concept.
No, not at all.
These were real people with real influence. And Shapiro reminds us that even renowned figures like Socrates and Epicurus served as hoplites.
It really underscores how deeply ingrained the hoplite ethos was in Athenian society. It wasn't just about military might, it was about civic duty, shared sacrifice, and ultimately having a stake in the system.
Right.
It's the shared experience, this need to cooperate, that really makes Athens unique.
That's fascinating. So we've got this tight-knit middle class forged in the fires of war. What happens next? They don't just hang up their helmets and call it a day, right?
No, not at all. This is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
This middle class, with their shared experiences and resources, they were able to cooperate in a way that a society divided by extremes of wealth and poverty just doesn't allow.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Think about it. When you're constantly struggling for survival, there's not much energy left for art or philosophy or, scientific inquiry.
You need a certain amount of stability, I'd imagine, to really push the boundaries like that.
Precisely. And Shapiro argues that Athenian society, with its hoplite citizenry at its core, provided that fertile ground for a real cultural explosion. It's this cooperation, this sense of shared destiny that allowed them to flourish.
And flourish. They did. And their impact on, science is undeniable. But Shapiro also points out something really interesting about their art.
Yeah, their art is incredible. It's not just about gods and heroes, although those are definitely there.
Right.
What sets Athenian art apart is this focus on everyday emotions, the struggles, the joys, the doubts of ordinary people. They were really exploring what it meant to be human in all its complexities.
Sounds like they were holding up a mirror to themselves and to us, even after all these centuries.
Exactly. And Shapiro uses a really brilliant example to illustrate this. He points to the opening lines of Agamemnon, a tragedy by Aeschylus, We encounter this lone night watchman on the rooftops. He's been up there for years watching the stars, waiting for a signal fire to announce the outcome of the Trojan War.
Wow, what an image. The loneliness, the uncertainty, the weight of expectation.
And that's the point. Aeschylus isn't just setting the scene, he's subtly preparing the audience for the themes of doubt, internal conflict, the human cost of war.
Right.
It's like he's saying, pay attention to these subtle emotions, they matter.
He's inviting us to connect with the characters on this deeper level, to feel their anxieties and uncertainties as our own.
Yes, and here's where it gets really fascinating. Shapiro connects this technique to Shakespeare.
Wait, Shakespeare? As in the guy who wrote Hamlet.
Exactly.
Centuries apart, and they're using the same storytelling techniques.
Exactly. 2,000 years later, we see a similar device in play. Think about the opening scene of Hamlet. Its night guards are outside Elsinore Castle, and guess what? They're talking about a ghost.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
From the very first lines, Shakespeare, like Aeschylus before him, is attuning our minds to the themes of doubt, uncertainty, the possibility of something beyond our understanding.
Wow. So we've got hoplites laying the foundation for democracy, this explosion of art and philosophy, exploring the human condition, and then Shapiro takes it a step further. He argues that the U.S. is the closest parallel to ancient Athens.
And his reasoning is rooted in that same core idea we've been discussing, an armed citizenry actively involved in governing.
Okay.
He argues that this shared characteristic is fundamental to the success of both societies.
That's a pretty bold claim. To say that the U.S., with all its complexities in history, mirrors ancient Athens because of this one shared characteristic, it is a pretty radical comparison to make.
Yeah, it certainly makes you think about, makes you reconsider the role of the citizen in a democracy, both in ancient Athens and potentially in the U.S., according to Shapiro.
Right.
There's this idea that citizens aren't just passive recipients of government.
Right.
They're active participants. Their voices and even their willingness to bear arms are part of what makes the system work.
Yeah, it's like this big, complex social contract.
Right.
Rights come with responsibilities.
Exactly.
But before we get too caught up in, these modern parallels, Shapiro brings us back to ancient Greece with this incredible quote from Protagoras. Man is the measure of all things.
And there it is right there, the core of the Greek worldview. This focus on human experience, on our emotions and perceptions as the fundamental truth of the world. It's why their art still resonates so deeply, why their philosophy still challenges us. They were grappling with the question of what it means to be human, in all its messy and complicated glory.
And doing a pretty good job of it, too.
They really were.
It's amazing how these ideas from thousands of years ago can still feel so relevant and immediate.
Absolutely. And that's the power of Shapiro's work. He's drawing this direct line from the hoplite shield to the heart of democracy, to the art that moved them to the very essence of how they saw the world. And he's challenging us to consider if that connection, that legacy still holds true in our modern world. Is the U.S. truly a reflection of ancient Athens?
Right.
Or are the differences just too vast to ignore? That's a question I hope you'll keep pondering.
It's a question worth wrestling with, I think. And that's the beauty of a deep dive like this, right? It's not about giving you all the answers. It's about giving you the tools and the inspiration to keep asking questions long after the episode is over. So the next time you encounter a piece of ancient Greek art or you hear about a debate about civic duty, remember those hoplites and the incredible legacy they left behind?
Absolutely.
Their story is a reminder that the choices we make as individuals and as a society, they can resonate for generations to come.